This is Dan Ferrisi, Group Director of Content and Editorial, Industrial and Tech at Emerald, here once again at the HDBaseT Alliance booth at InfoComm 2026, doing thought leadership panels and discussions with some of our industry's brightest minds on the topics of the day. Thank you so much, Keith Kennedy and Sam Metivier, for joining me today. Topic of conversation is the continued rise of USB-C. Can't wait to get into it. Again, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us, Dan. Good to see you as always.
As always, yes. So let's get right into it. USB-C has clearly crossed over from a consumer convenience to being a serious factor in ProAV design. What is pushing that adoption in ProAV specifically, and where do you see it heading over the next couple of years?
Well, there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, number one, it's an easy, simple, small connector to use. And it's powerful in all the different things that you can carry over that. You've got power, Ethernet, data, audio, video, everything you need, where before when we were just using HDMI or DisplayPort, we would have other connectors for all those other signals. So that's one of the things that's really driving it, and also the fact that the vast majority of our computers today that are coming out, especially laptop devices, have that, and in some cases only have that.
And as the connector and the spec continue to grow, we're even seeing that DisplayPort is becoming native. So instead of being a traditional alt mode where we'd have to alter the port's function, it's now becoming part of the port itself.
So people have been saying for a while that AV Matrix may be on its way out, but HDBaseT matrices keep showing up, at least from what I've seen, in new installations. How do you see their role changing alongside USB-C? What is keeping them relevant, assuming that you agree with that premise?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we obviously do a lot of other things besides, matrix switches, just like AVPro does. We take a little bit different approach because we're an OEM ODM, so we build for lots of different companies, whereas AVPro is a brand. But the matrix switch is a lot easier to set up, to configure, to install. It doesn't require the network configuration and all the other things you would have with an AV over IP solution. Also, a lot of times a network, the matrix switch will have ports that are more relevant to what is going on. A lot of times they're more specialized, but there's lots of different reasons driving that and keeping them relevant.
What would you say, Sam?
And a lot of integrators are actually more visual than they are virtual. And so an AV over IP system can kind of be hard to grasp for them because they don't understand how the connections work. And sometimes, like you said, they're not trained in network topologies. They're not trained how to configure the network switch. And so it's very difficult for them to get into that avenue.
I think that's certainly true, yes. So extending USB 3 reliably is still a real challenge for a lot of integrators. Hopefully you agree with that premise. Why does getting that extension right matter so much? When does a 2.5 gigabit per second USB 3 solution actually make more sense than pushing for something higher?
Well, definitely it is critical, and definitely it is hard to get right. And Valens is one of the few companies that give us as manufacturers and designers of products chipsets that allow us to reliably extend everything involved in that. And so going to your point about 2.5 gig versus 5, if we can throttle back the bandwidth, that allows us to do other things. And in the case with Valens, they've now equipped us with new firmware that allows the 6320 chipset to operate on 2 pairs of a category cable instead of all 4 in a shorter distance. So we can use the other 2 pairs to send video without having to have a driver involved and things like that. So for a lot of conference rooms, 2.5 gig for the cameras and everything else is perfectly adequate. 40 meters is perfectly adequate for that. And so that flexibility of throttling back the bandwidth gives us that flexibility to deploy these types of solutions.
And I think another thing is a lot of integrators don't realize the actual used bandwidth of the Microsoft Teams rooms, Zoom softwares that they're interacting with. And so when they integrate these camera systems, they might only be using up to 1 gig of bandwidth. And so by cutting back down to 2.5 and being able to add video extension onto that, we have really increased the versatility of the chipset.
So I think that interoperability is where a lot of very well-planned systems still may run into trouble. When you're helping a customer design around USB-C, HDBaseT, what are the questions they should be asking before they commit to a direction?
Well, I think, they also don't need to ask, or they should ask is, do you need USB and video? Do you just need video? Is the USB-C for a BYOD where I'm just trying to share content, or do I need to return the actual peripherals back to my device? And so by having a connection that can do both simultaneously, I think we're going in the right direction.
Keith?
I would definitely agree with everything Sam had to say, and add in that there are also other signals that they may want to have present, like Ethernet. What are the power requirements of the devices being plugged in? Do they want to have charging? Do they want 60 watts? Do they want 100 watts? Some docking stations out there now provide 140 watts to charge these monster laptops that some people are using. So understanding the use cases, understanding all the devices that are going to be connected in the room and in the system, allow the designer of the system to properly spec out the equipment, and then from our perspective, designing the actual product, understanding what we need to have in there. Although we're kind of taking the tack now where if you see a USB-C port on something that we make, it better have audio, video, data, Ethernet, power, all the audio routing capabilities, everything, because nobody knows what it is. When you plug something into USB-C, it doesn't come up on the screen or chime out in a voice that tells you, okay, you're not going to be able to charge this, or you're not going to be able to get Ethernet. They just plug it in. They think they're going to be able to get to the network and get to their files. They think they're going to be able to launch the Teams meeting or charge their laptop. So you better be able to provide all that.
100%. So as we begin to wrap up the conversation, any closing thoughts, observations, predictions, or insights into the continued rise of USB-C and the implications, the ripple effects it will have for practitioners in our industry?
I think that everyone is going to end up having to have a USB Type-C solution. I think that it's going to have to be an all-in-one, and I think if you're not designing products that do all of the functions, then you're not designing a product that's going to be viable in the future.
And Keith, last word?
So, the last time we did one of these things, or maybe it was the time before that, the title of the panel was USB-C is join the meeting. Well, that's not the case. USB-C is running the meeting today, so we really need to be paying attention and incorporate it into pretty much everything we do.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining me today here at the InfoComm 2026 at the HDBaseT Alliance booth. Always appreciate your insights, your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
My name is Dan Ferrisi, Group Director of Content and Editorial, Industrial and Tech at Emerald, here once again, as I say, at InfoComm 2026, in close partnership with our friends at the HDBaseT Alliance, talking to thought leaders in the industry about the most topical issues of the day. We'll see you soon.